Have you ever noticed that during this time of year, there are just certain words that show up everywhere? These are words that are always associated with Christmas. And one of those words is peace, which seems interesting because when you look around, peace doesn't always seem so obvious. Walmart isn't peaceful during Christmas time. Your parents or step-parents and their arguments about extended family and step-family doesn't exactly scream peaceful. Your frustration over whether or not you'll get the main thing you want for Christmas doesn't feel peaceful. Your teachers struggling to make it to the end of that first semester with a constant frown on their face doesn't exactly appear peaceful. And as you hear the fights between your family, as you cram for finals, as you're worried about money, as you're stressed about time with grandma and sharing a room with your crazy cousin, you don't exactly feel at peace. We've been talking a lot about this idea of Advent, which is the season leading up to Christmas. This is where we celebrate the anticipated arrival of Jesus, and we said that when it comes to celebrating Advent, there are a few words traditionally connected with this idea. Last time we talked about hope, today we're going to talk about peace. And even though peace is a word we probably hear a lot this time of year, what it actually means can be unclear. Sometimes some of us hear the word and we think peace means that everything is fine, that there's no problems, no issues, no fights or conflict. Or maybe peace means that everything is going exactly the way we want it to go. If life looks exactly as we planned or as we want, that's peaceful. Or peace can even mean that all of our relationships are going just the way we want. There's no arguing with an older sister, there's no annoying habits from our dad, nothing that makes us want to go crazy. In other words, for most of us, the idea of peace is connected with our circumstances. When everything outside of us and around us feels normal, and there's no hiccups and nothing unexpected happens, then we have peace. Why? Because everything feels great. But here's the problem. Think back on the past week. How many moments were there like that? About the past month? How about the past year? See, the thing is, if peace is the absence of anything that makes us feel uncomfortable, then peace isn't a reality for a lot of us. Because we know that our family is gonna fight, our friends are gonna hurt us, people are gonna leave us or let us down. Every one of us is gonna experience pain, hurt, and everything that comes from things not going the way that we like. And this time of year, as the holidays approach, our lives can actually be harder to handle, which can lead us to ask a big question. Is peace even possible? Is it something we can experience here and now, even when things don't go the way that we want? Or is it just wishful thinking? Well, I want you to know that peace is 100% possible. That's the good news. And the peace that's available to us may look different than what we think. With Christmas right around the corner, we're gonna look at a passage of scripture that tells us about the birth of Jesus. But before we go there, let's talk about what the world was like that Jesus was born into. Here's a quick history lesson. At the time of Jesus' birth, Caesar Augustus was the emperor. Augustus was famous for bringing about what was called Roman peace. And to the people in power, it looked like peace. Augustus defeated the Roman enemies, and he had the throne and all the power that he wanted. Over all the empire, there were kings that were in charge of specific areas to help keep the peace. King Herod was the king in charge of the area that Jesus was born into. And Herod was what you might call a psychopath. He was described as a tyrant, an evil genius. Listen, the things that he did were really dark. He was willing to do anything to get ahead, and he did those things. He killed members of his own family to keep control, and even though he was Jewish and ruled the land of Israel, he was really in service to the Roman Empire. So while he took the building projects to improve the temple, he was trying to get on the good side of the Jewish people. He was also power hungry and overtaxed the people at every chance he could. All so peaceful, right? No, I don't even think a little bit. So, Jesus enters. When Jesus was born, it was not exactly peaceful for the people who were being ruled. It was a time of fear. On the night of Jesus' birth, the book of Luke tells us that an angel appeared to some shepherds in the middle of the night, and they were watching their sheep, and the angel tells them this. And then a whole group of angels shows up in the sky, praising God, saying this. right there, from the mouths of angels, is the word peace. It was a promise. And for the people who wouldn't be familiar with Jewish scripture, it wouldn't have sounded familiar, because in the book of Isaiah, written long before the Jews arrived on the scene, the prophet Isaiah wrote this to the people of Israel. This was just the start of better things. Long before Jesus showed up, God told his people that someone was coming whose message would be peace. And it was good news for the group of people who had gotten used to being ruled by foreign and bad leaders, threatened, persecuted, and mistreated. They were ready for things to change. But here's the thing. Things didn't change after Jesus was born. Not even a little bit. Herod stayed in power until a guy named Antipas took power. He wasn't so great either. Ultimately, he was responsible for sentencing Jesus' cousin John the Baptist to death. After Caesar Augustus died, his son adopted Tiberius and became emperor. He was also a terrible leader. He had people killed in the effort to keep his power. He built prisons, dungeons, and torture chambers. He ordered people to be killed at random. So, in other words, there's no peace on earth, not for the people living under the rulers of these leaders, and yet, that's exactly what the prophet Isaiah promised. That's exactly what the angels talked about. So what happened? Was the prophecy wrong? Did the angels lie? Not exactly. Jesus brought peace, but it wasn't the kind of peace that people were expecting. Jesus brought a peace that doesn't change when our circumstances do. Jesus literally changed everything. He brought a peace that is not dependent on what is around us, a peace that doesn't make everything easy or take away all of our problems, but a peace that we can have when we know we have God with us no matter what. The world was far from peaceful when Jesus arrived. He didn't pretend that everything was going to be fine. He knew that things were bad and that they would get worse. And yet still, he preached peace. How? In the last meal Jesus had with his followers, hundreds of years after Isaiah talked about the Prince of Peace, and decades after the angels talked about peace for all people, Jesus talked about a different kind of peace. Jesus wasn't talking about a peace that had to do with the right people being in power or the wrong people being out of power and everything falling into place. Jesus was talking about a peace that wasn't based on circumstances at all. And how do we know? Because Jesus told his disciples this hours away from his own arrest and death. If he were talking about a peace that only happened when everything worked out perfectly, he never would have said what he had said. He knew what was coming, and still, he looked at his disciples in the eye and said, "You can have peace." That peace that Jesus talked about was peace that happens inside. Peace, as Jesus explained it, had nothing to do with experiences outside of his control. It had everything to do with how we faced them. He knew that no matter what happened, he could handle it because God was with him. God was the source of his peace, and God never changes. When things are falling apart on the outside, God stayed the same and could be a source of comfort at the worst time. No matter what happens around us, peace is possible because God is with us and for us. As unlikely as that sounds, the truth remains because of Jesus, peace is possible no matter what is happening around us. What does this mean for you? It means that peace is possible for you even if nothing changes on the outside. You can have peace on the inside, and it means that you can bring peace into every situation that you face. I want you to think of it like this. Where there is no peace, you can bring it. When you don't experience it on the outside, bring it on the inside. Own it. Be responsible for it. What does that look like? To start, ask yourself this question. Where in your life does peace not feel possible? And why? What needs to happen to feel like peace is possible? What would peace look like even if the circumstances didn't change? And then ask yourself this. What can I do to experience the peace that Jesus made possible? If peace doesn't seem realistic, who can I talk to help give me the perspective that I need? What scripture can I read to remind me of how to access the peace that Jesus talks about? And if I actually experience the peace that Jesus is referring to, how will my life look different? Not just externally, but internally. Even if things don't change on the outside, how can my experience of peace on the inside change the way that I deal with my circumstances? There's a lot of talk about peace on earth during the Christmas season. And as nice as it sounds, it can feel impossible for things to be experienced like that. But 2,000 years ago, a group of angels appeared to tell some shepherds that not only was peace possible, but it was true right now. And about 30 years later, Jesus sat with his friends before he was arrested and killed. He promised them peace again. Peace was made possible because Jesus made it possible. Imagine if you believed that that was true.